Hello everybody, I am Stelios, but you can call me Stelboy, and as you may or may not know, over half a year ago I uploaded two separate videos to this channel in which I explained why I think the Republic of Ireland should use the term British Isles to describe the archipelago off the coast of northwestern Europe that it is part of. Now, the problem with that is that because I uploaded two videos instead of simply one, due to the first video being, well, not the best, like it wasn't a bad video, however, it could have been better. Because I uploaded two videos instead of one, due to the first one, needing some improvements, people would go to the first video and not the second one, or vice versa, so they weren't getting the full perspective of why I thought, the Isles shouldn't be renamed, and why I thought the Republic of Ireland should use the term British Isles. So, what I've done is I've gotten both videos, and I've compiled them together in one single video, in the hopes that when people come to watch them, instead of having to watch two separate videos, they will get the full experience, the full perspective of my viewpoint, rather than simply going to one video and not the other, and not getting the full viewpoint. Now, to any Irish viewers, especially Irish viewers, because, reception from Irish viewers on both videos weren't exactly the most positive, we'll put it like that. I want to say, this isn't some sort of British imperial apologist video, or a video that makes out Britain in a totally positive light. I'm an ethnic Greek Cypriot, trust me, I know what it's like to have my homeland split in two. This isn't some sort of, Britain did absolutely nothing wrong, or Ireland is a British Isle because it's a geographical term. Like, that argument in itself, the geographical term argument, that is immediately ruled invalid, because if it is a geographical term, the Channel Islands should stop being considered part of the British Isles. So just saying it's a geographical term is invalid because of that. And I also want to say that when I say Ireland should use the term British Isles, I'm not saying, that the Republic of Ireland should look at the term British Isles and think, this is absolutely what the Isles are called. We should absolutely use this term. We are absolutely a British Isle. I'm not saying there should be just one term for this archipelago. Trust me, there are many valid reasons to rename the British Isles that I think, hold weight. I think, there are many valid reasons for and against renaming the Isles, and I'm not saying that one term should be used. Again, there's many terms for the Isles, as I explained in the videos, so I don't want Irish viewers to come to these videos thinking I'm some sort of, British imperial apologist who thinks Ireland should use this term because it's a geographical term or anything like that. And I also want to point out that this probably will be the final video I ever upload to my channel, because I'm literally, tomorrow is my enrollment day at college. I'm starting college literally on September 2nd. Right now, as of filming this, it's 27th of August. I start college on the 2nd of September, so, I'm not going to have a lot of time on my hands. I'm not going to really have the motivation for making videos. And I know I put up a community post about saying I'm unlisting my British Isles videos because I don't want to be associated with controversial content, but the thing is, as they say, the internet never forgets. Once you upload something, unless it's archived, or unless it's, fully taken down, the internet is always going to remember, especially if it gets a significant amount of attention, like especially my first video did. So, I've decided, okay, instead of putting both videos back up and people going to watch one video but not the other, as I've said, I've gotten both videos together, and I'm going to put them together as one single video. And before, the videos play out, I just want to say, please, please, please watch the entire video. Watch this entire video. I don't want you to get just part of my viewpoint and not all of it. Trust me, that is simply just not the way to go. Please watch the full thing if you can. I'm not saying you have to do it in one sitting, watch one part then and one part now, whatever, I don't care. Just please, please watch the entire thing rather than simply part of it, because otherwise you won't be getting the full reason behind my viewpoint. But anyway, that's enough from me. Let the videos play out. Hello everybody, it's Stelios from the Stelios Show, and like most people living in the United Kingdom, I call this archipelago off the coast of northwestern Europe, comprising islands such as Great Britain, Ireland, the Isle of Man, and many other 6,000 islands, the British Isles. However, if I was living in Ireland, especially the Republic of Ireland, that would be a very different story. The government of the Republic of Ireland doesn't recognise British Isles as a term to refer to the archipelago, and the majority of the Irish population similarly avoids using the term. There are numerous alternative names for the archipelago, such as Britain and Ireland, the Anglo-Celtic Isles, which is what I'd rename it to if it had to be renamed, the Atlantic Archipelago, and the Islands of the North Atlantic, just to name a few. Many bilingual Irish dictionary websites translate British Isles into Irish as Air, Agus and Britain More, literally meaning Ireland and Great Britain. In official documents jointly created by the United Kingdom and Ireland, however, such as the 1998 Good Friday Agreement, the archipelago is simply referred to as these islands. Now, on a surface level, it makes perfect sense for the Irish, especially nationalists and Republicans, to avoid using the term British Isles. Especially when you look at the history and relations between Ireland and its eastern neighbour, it is completely understandable why the Irish refrain from using the term and may view it as more of a political term than a geographical one. However, when you look at the history behind it, the term British Isles actually carries significant heritage for both the United Kingdom and Ireland. In this video I will explain how and why it does, and how and why Ireland is a British Isle from a geographical perspective. Now, for any Irish people here who may be thinking this is going to be some biased, inaccurate propaganda video promoting Britain in a totally positive light, let me reassure you, it's not. In fact, as an ethnic Greek Cypriot, I too have my own beef with the British. As much as I love this country and am fortunate to be here, that has nothing to do with history, especially imperial history. Britain significantly contributed to the Cyprus problem and the de facto partition of my native homeland, and if you ask people like South Asians, Middle Easterns, and of course the Irish, chances are they won't think positively of Britain entirely either. However, we aren't here to talk about beef, we're here to talk about facts. We're here to talk about how Ireland used to be referred to as Little Britain before the concept of Britishness was even a thing, how the indigenous peoples of the island of Great Britain were the Celtic Britons, who spoke Common Brittonic, and the English weren't a people until much later, among many other things. And I hope, after finishing this video, you will better understand the perspective of calling these islands the British Isles. First of all, a little bit of background. The archipelago was first discovered by Greek explorer Pythias of Massilia in 325 BCE. Upon his discovery, he named the largest island of the archipelago, now known as Great Britain, Albion, the earliest recorded name for the island of Great Britain, possibly derived from the Latin albus, meaning white, possibly referring to the White Cliffs of Dover, the first view of Great Britain from the continent. As for the second largest island, now known as Ireland, he named it Ierne. Now, it is uncertain why Pythias gave Ireland this name. However, it is possible that Ierne was derived from Eru, Ireland's eponymous goddess, from whom the island got its Irish language name, Air. Over time, the island began being referred to as Hibernia, its classical Latin name meaning land of winter, derived from the Latin hibernus, meaning wintry. In his 147 to 148 CE work, Almagest, Greek geographer Claudius Ptolemy referred to the largest island of the archipelago by its modern name, Great Britain. As for the second largest island, now known as Ireland, he referred to it as Little Britain. So, as you can see, at this point, Britain had now become a place name. This archipelago now had its name, Britain, derived from the Latin Britannia, a Latinization of its common Brittonic name, Brittany, possibly meaning the tattooed folk, referring to Celtic Britain body decoration. This archipelago was now the British Isles. If you came from an island of this archipelago, you were a Briton. In this case, the archipelago was still primarily inhabited by its indigenous Celtic population, so if you were a Briton, you were a Celtic Briton. If you were a Celtic Briton, your native language was Common Brittonic. Of course, the Anglo-Saxons later conquered and settled in Great Britain, wiping it of most of its indigenous Celtic population. Now, the last surviving Celtic Britons are either a minority in their own isle, like the Welsh, or have been completely migrated, like the Bretons. Speaking of whom, the Bretons have retained their native name, both in terms of describing themselves and their nation, Brittany. As you can hear in both of those terms, they incorporate the name of the Bretons' original homeland, Britain. In fact, Breton is the old French translation of Britain. In addition to that, the terms Welsh and Wales are the modern descendants of the Old English word weal, meaning foreigner or stranger, which is ironically what the Anglo-Saxons referred to the Celtic Britons as. Now, the Anglo-Saxons definitely appropriated the term British Isles. However, that does not take away from the fact that Britain was originally nothing more than a place name accepted by its indigenous Celtic population, who called themselves Britons without any second thoughts. As such, Britain as a word should still be used in that sense, as a place name. Ireland is British, just geographically. Obviously only the 6 counties in the north can be called British politically. So, when it comes to the topic of the name of the British Isles, if they were to be renamed, all that would happen is heritage would just be taken away from both sides. Meaning, by refusing to acknowledge the term British Isles, Ireland is ignoring a part of its Celtic heritage. Obviously they have reasons for this due to the term's appropriation, but that still does not take away from the fact that Britain was originally nothing more than a place name accepted by its indigenous Celtic population. Obviously they have reasons for this due to the term's appropriation, but the term still carries heritage within it for both sides, as the name of the modern British state for the United Kingdom, and as the Celtic name for the archipelago it is part of for Ireland. And for that reason, I believe Ireland should use this term. So, now that we've established Ireland is and should refer to itself as a British Isle, that means it's a British island, right? Well, no. As similar as the two terms are, they actually have very different meanings. British Isles is a geographical name for this archipelago, whilst British Islands is a term within UK law that refers to the UK, the Isle of Man, and the Channel Islands collectively. As such, in this sense, Ireland isn't a British island like, for example, the Isle of Man is, but it is certainly a British Isle from a geographical perspective. Now, in complete retrospect, I won't say the United Kingdom uses the term British Isles in a completely geographical sense. I say this because even though they don't form part of the archipelago, the Channel Islands are considered part of the British Isles. Why? Because they're British Crown dependencies, therefore they're British Isles? But they don't form part of the archipelago. Wasn't this a geographical term? So, because of that, I personally don't recognise the Channel Islands as part of the British Isles. They're definitely British Islands, but they don't form part of the British Isles archipelago, and in this sense, I can understand even more why the Irish may see this term as more of a political one than a geographical one. As such, the Channel Islands should stop being recognised as British Isles. Now that we're at the end of this video, I hope you, the viewer, especially if you're an Irish viewer, now have a better understanding of the term British Isles, and why I believe Ireland should use this term. Because originally, it was nothing more than a place name accepted by its indigenous Celtic population, who called themselves Britons without any second thoughts, and named their native language, Common Brittonic, after it. The term British Isles carries heritage for both sides. To rename the Isles is to take away heritage from both sides. Hello everybody, it's Stelios from the Stelios Show, and as you may or may not know, over 2 weeks ago I uploaded a video onto this channel titled Ireland should use the term British Isles, here's why, where I explained my reasonings as to why I think Ireland should recognise and use the term British Isles to refer to this archipelago of the coast of northwestern Europe it is part of. Click the link in the top right hand corner here to see it. And whilst for the most part I thought it was a pretty good video, safe to say I made many flaws throughout it. So in this follow-up video I will just be going through the problems of my last video and clearing them up, going through any good points I made in my last video that I still stand by, and making some new points to defend calling the Isles the British Isles, which I did not have in mind at the time of making my last video. But at the end of the day, I have one goal and only one goal with this follow-up video. No bad oversimplifications that could lead to misleading people like I did in my last video. Trust me, I cringe whenever I look back at them. So, first of all, the problems. The biggest problems with my previous video were the oversimplifications I made regarding the Celtic Britons and the Common Brittonic language. I made a community post about and edited a description of and left a pinned comment on my last video addressing this issue, but in case you didn't see any of them, I'm just going to address this issue one last time here. In the video, I claim that when the Isles were still majority Celtic, that if you came from the British Isles, you were a Celtic Briton. However, this description only applied to the indigenous Celtic peoples of solely what is now England, Wales and the Scottish Lowlands. The inhabitants of what are now Ireland and the Scottish Highlands were not Celtic Britons in the same way the actual Celtic Britons were Celtic Britons. The way I said it in the video suggested all peoples of the Isles were Celtic Britons, when they were all just Celtic. Not all were Celtic Britons. Secondly, only the actual Celtic Britons spoke Common Brittonic. The inhabitants of what are now Ireland and the Scottish Highlands spoke Goidelic. Again, the way I said it in the video suggested all peoples of the Isles spoke Common Brittonic, when this only applied to the actual Celtic Britons. I can assure you I did not make these statements with the intention of lying and manipulating the truth to justify calling the Isles British. I basically originally intended to use Celtic Britons as a catch-all term for all Celtic inhabitants of the Isles, but thanks to the commenter who pointed this out, I now realise that I shouldn't have used such oversimplified language. I am very sorry for this, and will do better now. Okay, that's the problems out of the way. Now we're going to get into some of the good points I made in my last video that I still stand by. Firstly, I still stand by my belief that the Isles should not be renamed because British Isles is a Celtic term, even if appropriated by the Anglo-Saxons and the British Empire. As mentioned in my last video, British Isles is derived from Britannia, a Latinisation of Brittany, Great Britain's Common Brittonic name, meaning the tattooed folk, referring to Celtic Briton body decoration. Here's another good point that I brought up. The fact that, when the Isles were first discovered, Claudius Ptolemy referred to Ireland as Little Britain further goes to show how Britain was originally nothing more than a Celtic place name. In fact, another historical name for the Isles, which I didn't bring up in my last video, is the Britannic Isles, clearly a historical adaptation of British Isles, further going to show how Britain is a Celtic word. And now for the last good point I made in my previous video that I still stand by. The Channel Islands should stop being recognised as British Isles. If this is such a geographical term, the Channel Islands should stop being considered part of the Isles. They do not form part of the archipelago geographically speaking. Therefore, they should stop being recognised as part of the British Isles, because geographically speaking, they don't form part of the archipelago of the British Isles. Okay, that wraps up the good points I made that I wanted to bring back up. But before I go into any new points I may have, I want to bring up a point that some people in the comment section of my last video were bringing up. Some people in the comment section of my last video brought up how British Isles, as a term, ignores the Goidelic speakers of the Isles. And yes, this is true. However, I still stand by my belief that the Isles should be called the British Isles because British Isles is a Celtic term. Think about it. Ireland is Celtic. England is not Celtic. Britain is a Celtic word. Therefore, in this sense, Ireland is British. Ireland is more British than England ever will be, because Britain is a Celtic word, Ireland is Celtic, and England is not Celtic. Ireland and the Irish are more British than England and the English ever will be. They should take that as a compliment. In fact, that leads me to making one of my new points, which is actually the main reason why I'm making this video. With how anglicised the term British Isles has become, all renaming it instead of reclaiming it would do is admit to such anglification of this aboriginally Celtic term. It is important that we reclaim the term British Isles to show how it's an aboriginally Celtic term. Even renaming it something like the British Irish Isles could admit to this anglification, as by feeling the need to differentiate Irish identity from British identity, it suggests that British identity is now English identity, ignoring all other Celts of the Isle of Great Britain, when Irish identity and British identity both used to be Celtic identities. Think about it. Why do the Irish, Scottish and Welsh seem to get along so well with each other? Because they're all Celtic. The Irish, Scottish and Welsh are native to this archipelago. The English are not. The English wiped out most of the indigenous Celtic inhabitants of the Isle of Great Britain, reducing any remaining Aboriginal Celts on the Isle of Great Britain into a minority within their own isle. No amount of appropriation by the Anglo-Saxons to the British Empire will ever be able to take the term British Isles away from its Celtic roots. No amount of appropriation by the Anglo-Saxons to the British Empire will ever be able to take away from the fact that Brits used to be Celts before the Anglo-Saxons showed up. The term British Isles must be reclaimed to take away the Anglocentrism and the Anglification of this aboriginally Celtic term. Everyone living in the British Isles is British. Brits used to be Celts before the Anglo-Saxons showed up. Therefore, the remaining Celts of the British Isles, including the Irish, are more British than the English ever will be. They should take that as a compliment. Now, before we get into the rest of this video, I actually would like to admit that I will be reading most of, if not all of the rest of this video, off of a script, simply because I really want to get this video out, and besides, memorization is just too hard for me, so from this part of the video onwards, unless I decide I can memorize this part well enough, I will indeed be reading off of a script, so just a little heads up. But anyway. Now, in complete fairness, I actually do believe that if the Celtic Britain still existed, then it wouldn't make sense for the Isles to be called the British Isles, as the Celtic Britain still existing would create a single Celtic British identity, which wouldn't apply to all islanders of the British Isles. Calling the Isles the British Isles in the world where the Celtic Britons are still a people would give them too much centrism. Therefore, if the Celtic Britain still existed, I'd rename the Isles the Brito-Gaelic Isles, as this name includes both native language families of the Isles, Brittonic and Goidelic/Gaelic. And because of that, I have now changed my stance on what I'd rename the Isles to if they absolutely had to be renamed. In my last video, I said I'd go for Anglo-Celtic Isles. However, because that name would validate the Anglocentrism associated with the term British, I would now rename the Isles the Brito-Gaelic Isles if they absolutely had to be renamed, as this alternative name of mine has nothing to do with heritage or identity. It has everything to do with language. However, since the Celtic Britons don't exist anymore, there is no longer a single Celtic British identity. The closest we have to one now are the remaining Aboriginal Celts currently inhabiting the Isles, i.e. the Scottish, Manx, the indigenous inhabitants of the Isle of Man, and, I think I said the Welsh, I think I did. The point is, the closest we have to a single Celtic British identity now are the, remaining Celtic inhabitants of the British Isles. So, the Scottish, Welsh, Manx, and the Irish. Meaning, if you're a Celt and you originate from a British Isle, you are a true Briton. You're Celtic and you originate from an aboriginally Celtic Isle. You originate from an aboriginally Celtic Isle like the Celtic Britons did. Native Britons are Celts. The English are not Celts. Therefore, the Scottish, Welsh, Manx, and Irish are more British than the English ever will be. They're native. The English aren't. They should take that as a compliment. And that brings us to the end of this follow-up video. I hope you enjoyed it, but for now, goodbye and have a nice day.